CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 4, Part 1, Audio by Renee Matthew. This is the first audio for Chapter 4, Towards Modernization. As the picture clearly gives you an idea on the modern world, that is what we are going to discuss here. So far we saw how the empires and the history shaped the olden sections of the world, the discoveries of the world, the progress of the world, and how everything came into a modern phase. It was after a lot of destruction. Along with destruction, there was a lot of progress which happened along the timeline also. Now, this particular chapter is divided into three sections: the Industrial Revolution, displacing indigenous people, paths to modernization. Three sections are there. So let's start with an overview for the whole chapter, as we usually do. The overview. In the previous section, we have read about the developments which were so important in the medieval and early modern world. Now, these developments led to a great progress, and that is how we have the current modern world. And some of the changes which were brought about was the system of feudalism, the European Renaissance. There was a lot of war and encounter and meetings between the Europeans and the people of America. All these things brought people to the modern phase or progress. So when you gain something, definitely there is a chance that you lose over many things. So that is what happened in the history of the world also. Some of the phenomena which took place over the years contributed to the making of our modern world, and that is how evolution took place, especially from the mid-15th century onwards. Rapid changes were happening. Maybe people were not able to feel it at that particular point of time, but over the period we can see that drastic changes, dramatic changes, and even small changes contributed to the development of the modern world. Small changes, very small nuances also contributed to the shaping of the history of the world. There were two main developments which contributed to what is known as modernization. It is a process where we are evolving, or we are still in the path of modernization. Two major developments. The first one was the Industrial Revolution phase, where industries and machines replaced people. Next was a series or sequence of political revolution, which of course caused a lot of stress and upheavals among the natives, but it transformed subjects into citizens. It started with the American Revolution, and then the French Revolution was also a part of it. So these two things led to a great development, a major change which shaped the history of the world. The first one was the Industrial Revolution. The second one was the transformation which took place in the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Britain was the first industrial nation of the world. It is believed that British industrialization provided the model for all the others to incorporate industries in their economy, to incorporate industries in their sectors, in the economy and also in the progress, as a result of which trade also took place. Trade and commerce was also following the industrialization. When we discuss theme 9, we will see that 2 points are particularly highlighted. The first one is, historians, when they studied the history of the world, they started questioning some of the earlier ideas about the Industrial Revolution. Some of the ideas were questioned. They did not observe it as it is. Each country had a different experience of other nation. They started learning from other people also. Without even producing any model, they were learning from others. Some people produced model, and the basis of industrialization, the basic model, was produced by, of course, England. But others just copied or even learned from the progressive nations and the economies. For example, in Britain, coal and cotton textile industries were developed in the first phase of industrialization itself. We saw that there was a progress in the development or the production of coal and cotton. Even the transportation was also in progressive mode. The invention of the railways took place in the second stage of this process. In the first stage, it was more of cotton and coal. Second stage, it saw the development of railways and the setup of railways, invention of railways itself. In other countries like Russia, they started industrialization much later, not like the Europeans. They studied from the British people, they saw what was happening there, then slowly they also entered the phase of industrialization, that too from the late 19th century onwards. Railway and other heavy industries emerged in a very initial phase of industrialization, where in Russia. In Britain, it entered in the second phase, but in Russia, it came towards the end of the phase and not in the initial stage. So, role of the state, of banks in industrialization differed from country to country. We can understand that the state and of course the nationalized banks played a very important role in the progressive nature of the country, and it differed from one country to another. There was a treatment of the Britishers, which we can see in theme 9, which it will help us to understand one particular aspect about the industrial path, the trajectories or the pathways of the industrialization which took place in other nations, especially that of USA and Germany. They were the two significant industrial powers later. Okay, they studied everything from the Britishers. They copied also sometimes, but USA and Germany had a different style of executing it. Because just now I told you that the economic power and everything differed from place to place, and they had their own evolution and their ideas. They improvised on what they learned from the Britishers. Now this particular section, it emphasizes on the human and material cost incurred by Britishers on industrialization. How much was spent? What was the cost? How much of manual labor? How much of machine labor? All these things was used. The plight of the laboring poor. What happened to the laborers? How did they make use of manpower? Especially of children. And because of that, there was a great degradation in environment. Environment started losing its quality. We started affecting the environment. And there was a consequent stray array of epidemics which took place. So now also we are in this pandemic mode. So it is not something new to history. History has always seen this over time, where people start affecting the environment and naturally they get contracted by epidemics like cholera and tuberculosis, and like that half of the population gets wiped out. We will also learn about the industrial pollution which took place in the earlier phases of history, especially with that of cadmium mercury that poisoned in Japan. It stirred the conscience of the people. They were very badly, they felt insecure. And it led to mass movements against indiscriminate industrialization. So when the life of the people got affected, when it stirred the life of people, they started reacting against the indiscriminacy of industrialization. That is when they understood that industrialization has a different phase. The problem with human beings is that they do not know where to put a limit. It is because of the greed and of the extra avarice of some people. It is because of power which is invested in some hands that all the others suffer. They want more. They are not satisfied. In the previous chapter, in chapter 3, we saw that the Spaniards and Portuguese were not satisfied with the gold and silver that they got from Africa and the Americas. As a result of all these things, European powers began to colonize parts of America, Asia, and South Africa. They started colonizing all these places, and it tells you the story of the European settlers, what they did to the native people, how they reacted to it. Of course, they were tolerant because power was in the hands of the Europeans, but still how they evolved over time is also mentioned in this particular section. The bourgeois mentality of the settlers, They were very high-minded people, made them buy and sell everything, including land and water. They wanted to buy. They went to their place. It is not their place, but they wanted to buy and sell everything, and they wanted the natives to buy things. Native people have free access to all these things because it is their own country. But what did the smart settlers do? They wanted them to buy and sell everything. The natives appeared very uncivilized to the Europeans. They took advantage of that. If you do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can one buy them? Okay, so they also asked, and the natives were able to question the Europeans also. They said, you don't understand the freshness of the nature, the sparkle of the water, but still you want us to buy all these things, which is unfair. And there are two more points discussed here. Of course, the natives did not feel the need to own land, fish or animals because it was their land. They did not understand the meaning of ownership. They had no desire to commodify them. They were very complicit with what they had. They were very happy. They were very satisfied with the life that they led till the Europeans came there, and then they understood that they engaged both human beings and the commodities and the resources. Everything was exploited and carried over to their land. They were very selfish and greedy. They started exchanging everything instead of gifting it. If things needed to be exchanged, they could simply be gifted. They said, why can't we gift things instead of just selling them and taking them or looting them away? The natives and the Europeans represented competing notions of civilization. Two different civilizations can be seen in any place of colonization. The extremes can be seen there. The former, that is, the natives never allowed or wanted. Consciously, they did not want the Europeans to wipe out their culture. They did not want the Europeans to touch their culture, but they were helpless. Although the US and Canadian governments of the mid-20th century desired natives to join the mainstream, it is like optional. It is not that they are forcing you. If you want, you can join the mainstream. And the Australian authorities of the same period attempted to simply ignore their traditions and cultures. So the whites always wanted the natives to ignore their culture and join the mainstream, that is, of the Europeans.